Captain Laura Hayes yawned as she guided the Earth survey vessel Pathfinder through the asteroid belt. Another day, another routine mining survey. The ship's sensors beeped steadily, cataloging mineral compositions that might be valuable to Earth's growing space industry. "Captain, I'm picking up something odd," said Ben Clark, her navigation officer. His eyes were fixed on his screen, brow furrowed. "It's not an asteroid." Laura leaned forward in her chair. "Show me." The main view screen shifted to display a strange object moving between the asteroids with deliberate precision. It was sleek and silver, roughly the size of a small car, with no visible propulsion system. Its surface pulsed with soft blue light. "Is it one of ours?" Laura asked, though she already knew the answer. "Negative," replied Susan Wells, the communications specialist. Her voice trembled slightly. "It matches no known Earth design, and it's scanning us." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. After centuries of wondering, humanity was no longer alone. "Open a channel," Laura ordered. Her heart raced, but her voice remained steady. "This is Captain Laura Hayes of the Earth survey vessel Pathfinder. We are on a peaceful mission. Please identify yourself." For several long moments, nothing happened. Then the object emitted a flash of light, and the ship's computers came alive with new data. "Captain, it's responding." Susan's fingers flew over her console, not in words, but in mathematical sequences. Universal language. It's sending coordinates, and what looks like an invitation. Within hours, the news reached Earth. Emergency sessions of the United Nations convened as scientists worked to understand the alien message. The coordinates pointed to a location near Proxima Centauri, Earth's nearest stellar neighbor, where the aliens apparently had a station. 2 weeks later, diplomat Eric Mason stood before the UN General Assembly, his face solemn. "The message is clear," he said. "They call themselves the Galactic Council, a federation of 7 advanced species. They've been watching us for some time and believe we're ready for contact. They're inviting Earth representatives to discuss potential trade and membership." Beside him, Dr. Olivia Franklin nodded. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had been chosen to accompany Eric on this historic mission. "This could be the most important moment in human history," she told the assembly. "A chance to leap forward by centuries in our development." Not everyone was convinced. In a secure Pentagon briefing room, military leaders voiced their concerns. "We know nothing about their intentions," argued Commander Sam Morin. "They could be peaceful traders or the advanced scouts for an invasion." But humanity's curiosity and hope outweighed its caution. The newly constructed interstellar vessel Pioneer was prepared for the journey, with Eric and Olivia as Earth's chosen representatives. The night before departure, Eric stood at the observation deck of the Lunar Launch Facility, gazing at the blue marble of Earth. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked Olivia, who stood beside him. "We don't have a choice," she replied. "They know we're here. Better to meet them as equals than hide and appear weak." The journey to Proxima Centauri took 3 weeks using the experimental drive system. As they approached the coordinates, they saw it, a massive structure orbiting the star, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface gleamed with lights and movement. A city in space. "We're being hailed," said the Pioneer's communications officer. A face appeared on the view screen, humanoid but clearly alien, with silver-flecked skin and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. "Welcome, humans," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Overseer Kalzik of the Galactic Council. We have been expecting you." What Eric and Olivia didn't see was the message Kalzik sent after ending the transmission. "The Earth representatives have arrived. They suspect nothing. Proceed with the resource acquisition plan as discussed. Their planet is ripe for harvest." Eric Mason had never seen anything so beautiful. The Council Station was a marvel of engineering and art. Crystal walkways connected massive towers that seemed to float in space. Strange plants with glowing leaves lined the paths, and beings of all shapes and sizes moved about with purpose. "This way, please," said their guide, a tall, thin alien who had introduced herself as Leary of the Neary species. Her skin had a purple tint, and her forearms moved in graceful patterns as she spoke. "The council is eager to meet you." Olivia walked beside Eric, her scientist's eyes trying to take in everything at once. She pulled out a small device and took readings of the air. "The atmosphere here is adjusted for us," she whispered to Eric. "They've gone to great lengths to make us comfortable." "Let's hope that's a good sign," Eric replied. The council chamber was a large room with a round table. 5 beings sat waiting for them. Overseer Kalzik stood and spread his arms wide. "Earth representatives, we welcome you to the heart of galactic civilization," he said. "Please, be seated." Kalzik introduced the other council members. Traz of the Zentari, whose blue skin seemed almost transparent. Vox of the Krell, a short, stocky being with thick armor-like plates. Elder Nema of the Nhiri, and Director Pol of the Vargans, who looked similar to Kalzik but with darker skin. "The council has existed for 10,000 years, Kalzik explained. "We bring order and progress to the galaxy, and now we wish to extend membership to Earth." Holograms appeared, showing beautiful technology, ships that could fold space, medical devices that could cure any disease, energy sources that would never run out. "All this can be yours," Kalzik said. "We ask only for certain mining rights in your solar system, areas you do not use or need." Eric studied the agreement that appeared before him. Something didn't feel right. The legal terms were complex, with many cross-references that made it hard to understand the full scope of what they were giving away. "I noticed this grants mining rights not just in the asteroid belt, but also on Mars and our moon," Eric said carefully. Kalzik waved a hand dismissively. "Only in regions without human presence. We would never interfere with your settlements." "We need time to review this properly," Eric insisted. "This agreement will affect all of humanity. We can't rush it." Kalzik's friendly expression hardened slightly. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He paused. "Though I should mention that the Drakari Empire has also shown interest in your region of space. They are less interested in mutually beneficial relationships." The threat was clear. Eric and Olivia exchanged glances. That night, in their quarters, Olivia expressed her concerns. "Did you notice how they avoided any specific questions about their technology? And this Drakari Empire, it feels like a made-up threat." "I agree," Eric said. "But what choice do we have? We need to secure Earth's position in this new galactic community." The next day, under pressure and with reservations, Eric signed the agreement. 3 weeks later, Earth celebrated as the first council ships arrived in orbit. They brought medical technology that cured several diseases and power generators that produced clean energy. People around the world cheered at public viewings of the alien ships. At the Pentagon, Commander Sam Warren watched the footage with a frown. "Something's not right," he told his aide. "Why give us medical tech and power generators, but nothing to improve our space capabilities?" "Maybe those come later," the aide suggested. "Maybe," Sam said. "Or maybe they don't want us building better ships." In his private office, Sam pulled up data from long-range sensors. The council had already established large mining operations in the asteroid belt. The scale was much bigger than what had been described in the public announcements. Meanwhile, on the council station, Overseer Kalzik met with Director Pol in a secure room. "How long before we can begin Phase 2? Pol asked. 6 Earth months, Kalzik replied. "By then, our position will be too strong for them to resist. The humans have no idea what's coming." 6 months after the signing, Eric Mason stood at the window of his office at the United Nations, watching rain fall over New York City. His desk was covered with reports and complaints. The council ships had moved far beyond the agreed mining zones. They now surrounded Mars like hungry wolves, their massive machines tearing into the red planet at an alarming rate. His screen beeped with an incoming call. It was Olivia, calling from her lab. "Eric, you need to see this," she said, her face grim. I've been studying the materials the Council is taking from Mars and the asteroid belt. They're not just mining common metals. They're specifically targeting rare elements that we need for our own developing space technology. Eric rubbed his tired eyes. So they're making sure we stay dependent on them. Exactly. And those technologies they gave us. I've taken one of the medical devices apart. It's outdated by their standards, probably technology they stopped using centuries ago. The door to Eric's office opened, and his assistant rushed in. Sir, 3 more Council mining ships have entered Earth orbit. They're positioning themselves over Australia, Brazil, and Canada. Eric's stomach tightened. This was not part of any agreement. He immediately sent a formal protest message to Overseer Kalzik, demanding an emergency meeting of the Council. 2 days later, Eric sat before the Council, presenting evidence of the treaty violations. Kalzik and the other Council members listened with bored expressions. These are not violations, Kalzik said when Eric finished. If you read Section 12, Subsection 7 of the agreement, you'll find that the Council has the right to adjust mining operations as needed based on resource availability. That section refers to operations within the asteroid belt, not Earth itself, Eric argued. Director Pohl leaned forward. You humans should be grateful for our generosity. Many species would give anything for the technologies we've shared with you. Outdated technologies, Eric shot back, while you take the resources we need to develop our own. The chamber went silent. Eric realized he had made a mistake. So, Kalzik said quietly, you've been studying our gifts, looking for ways to advance beyond what we've allowed. He turned to the guards at the door. Escort Representative Mason to detention for questioning. He appears to be engaged in espionage against the Council. As guards approached, Eric looked desperately to Elder Nima, who had seemed more sympathetic to humans. But she avoided his gaze. Back on Earth, Commander Sam Morin met with Peter Grant, a civilian engineer who had been analyzing Council technology. I found something strange, Peter said, spreading diagrams on the table. All their systems have heavy shielding against radiation, much more than needed. What does that mean? Sam asked. I think their species evolved on planets with very little natural radiation. Look at these readings from when Council members visited the UN. Peter showed him a data tablet. Their bodies produce stress hormones when exposed to radiation levels that are harmless to humans. Sam's eyes widened as he understood the implications. That's why they refuse to visit our nuclear power plants. And why they wear those protective suits on Earth. It's not just for show. They're extremely vulnerable to certain types of radiation that we barely notice. At that moment, Olivia burst into the room, out of breath. Eric's been arrested, she said. And it gets worse. I managed to download some files from the Council database before I had to flee the station. They classified Earth as a resource world. They're planning full-scale mining operations in every resource-rich area on the planet. Sam's face hardened. How long do we have? Days, maybe a week, Olivia replied. And they have weapons that make our strongest military forces look like toys. Sam looked at Peter. Can we use what you found about their radiation weakness? Peter nodded slowly. With some work, yes. But we'd need time to develop the right kind of weapons. Then we better get started, Sam said. And we need to do it quietly. If the Council realizes what we're planning. Outside the window, a Council ship slowly descended through the clouds, casting a massive shadow over the city. The United Nations Security Council meeting room was packed with world leaders. On screens around the room, live feeds showed massive Council ships hovering over the Sahara Desert, the Siberian plains, and the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Smaller craft descended from these ships, carrying mining equipment unlike anything seen on Earth. They didn't even ask permission, said the President of the United States, her face pale with anger. They just moved in. We attempted to block their landing in the Sahara, reported the Egyptian representative. They destroyed 3 military bases and 6 fighter jets in less than a minute. 42 soldiers died. Similar reports came from other countries, Any resistance was met with swift, overwhelming force. The Council's weapons could disable electronics from a distance, making most modern military equipment useless. "What about Mason?" asked the Chinese premier. "Can he negotiate?" Olivia, who had been invited to present her findings, shook her head. "Eric is being held prisoner. The Council no longer sees us as partners. According to the files I downloaded, they've reclassified Earth as a resource world without voting rights or protections." The room fell silent as this sank in. "So what do we do?" someone finally asked. Commander Sam Morin stepped forward. "We fight back, but not in the way they expect." He nodded to Peter Grant, who activated a holographic display. "The Council species evolved on planets with minimal radiation," Peter explained. "They're extremely vulnerable to certain types of radiation that are harmless to humans. We've been developing weapons that exploit this weakness. But we need time," Sam added. "A few weeks at least, and we need to keep the Council from suspecting what we're doing." The Secretary General stood up. "Then we will give you that time. We will appear to comply with their demands while secretly preparing our defense." On the Council station, Eric sat in a small cell, staring at the wall. The door slid open, and a guard threw in another prisoner, a female alien with the distinctive purple skin of the Neri. "What are you in for?" Eric asked once the guard left. "I spoke against the Council's treatment of Earth," she replied. "I am Karen Miller. I worked as a diplomatic assistant to Elder Nema." Eric was surprised. "You're human, but you look—" "Genetic modification to help me blend in," Karen explained. "Makes my job easier, or it did, until I got caught passing information to sympathetic Council members." "There are Council members who oppose what's happening to Earth." Karen nodded. "Many of the lower-ranking officials and citizens from various species. Earth isn't the first world the Council has exploited, but speaking against it means punishment or worse." "How many worlds have they done this to?" "At least 12 that I know of. Some resist and are crushed. Others submit and are stripped of resources until they're no longer useful." Eric leaned forward. "If there are others who oppose the Council, could we form an alliance?" Karen's eyes widened. "It would be dangerous. But—" she glanced at the cell door. "I still have contacts. If we could escape." Back on Earth, the Council's mining operations expanded rapidly. Entire communities were forced to relocate as valuable resource sites were claimed. Council representatives promised this was temporary and for the greater good of Earth's relationship with the galactic community. In a hidden facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Sam, Peter, and Olivia worked with a team of scientists and engineers from around the world. They had converted the radiation discovery into working prototypes, small devices that emitted targeted radiation harmless to humans, but deadly to Council species. "The delivery system is the challenge," Peter said, showing Sam their latest design. "We need to get these close enough to their ships and bases. And we need to hit them all at once," Sam added. "If we only strike a few targets, they'll adapt quickly." Olivia looked up from her microscope. "I might have another option." She showed them a Petri dish containing a glowing bacteria. "This organism naturally produces the exact type of radiation that affects Council species, and it's completely harmless to humans and Earth life." "A biological weapon?" Sam asked, frowning. "More like a protective shield," Olivia corrected. "We could release it around human settlements. Any Council species trying to enter would get sick within hours." On the main view screen, a new Council ship, larger than any before, entered Earth's orbit. A message came through on all channels worldwide. "People of Earth, this is Overseer Kalzik. Your planet has been officially designated Resource World 1457. New extraction quotas have been established. Failure to comply will result in orbital bombardment of major population centers." On the surface, Earth appeared to submit to Council demands. Humans moved away from resource-rich areas as ordered. Mining operations expanded, with massive ships carrying away tons of minerals each day. Council officials trudged through human cities, giving orders and expecting immediate obedience. But beneath this show of compliance, resistance grew. In the underground facility, now code-named Haven, Sam Morin studied a global map marked with red dots, Council mining sites and bases. "Our radiation weapons are ready," Peter reported. "We've produced enough to target their major installations. The delivery systems are disguised as maintenance bots. They can approach Council ships without triggering alarms." Olivia entered the room, looking tired but pleased. "The bacteria is ready too. We've started releasing it near population centers. It spreads quickly but stays dormant until activated by a specific radio frequency." "What about our allies?" Sam asked. On the screen, the face of Karen Miller appeared, still disguised as a Neri. She and Eric had escaped their cell 3 weeks ago and had been building a network of allies on the Council station. "We've made contact with representatives from 6 exploited worlds," Karen reported. "They're eager to join the resistance. The Zentari are particularly helpful. They have people throughout the Council's communication systems. We've also discovered something important," Eric added, stepping into view. "The Council keeps most of its warships at 3 main bases. They never expected to face organized resistance from multiple fronts at once." Sam nodded. "That's their weakness. They rely on fear and overwhelming force against one target at a time. They don't have the resources to fight everywhere simultaneously." "When do we move?" Karen asked. 2 more weeks, Sam replied. "We need to finish positioning our weapons and coordinate with all resistance groups." "We might not have 2 weeks, Eric warned. "The Council is getting suspicious. They've noticed some of their workers getting sick near human settlements." On the Council station, Overseer Kalzik paced angrily in front of the Council members. "Humans are more troublesome than we anticipated," he growled. "Our mining personnel report increasing illness when working near their cities." "Could it be some Earth disease?" asked Elder Nema. "Our scans detect unusual radiation patterns," Director Pohl replied. "It appears deliberately targeted at our biology." Kalzik slammed his fist on the table. "They're developing weapons against us. We must crush this resistance immediately." He turned to his military commander. "Prepare the fleet for full orbital bombardment of Earth's major cities. We'll make an example of them for any world that dares resist us." "But the resources," Traz of the Zentari began. "We'll still be there after we've taught them their place," Kalzik snapped. On Earth, Sam received an urgent message from their spy in the Council's communication center. The attack order had been given. The Council fleet would begin bombardment in 3 days. "We need to move now," Sam told his team. "We're not fully ready, but we have no choice. If we succeed, we free Earth," Peter said. "If we fail." "We won't fail," Olivia said firmly. "The Council's greed made them careless. They never bothered to truly understand us, or what we're capable of." Sam sent the coded message to all resistance cells. Operation Dawn Strike would begin in 24 hours. Around the world, quiet preparations accelerated. The disguised weapons were moved into position near Council ships and bases. Military forces readied their remaining conventional weapons, knowing they would face overwhelming firepower, but determined to protect their home. In orbit, Council ships began moving into bombardment positions, unaware of the small maintenance bots approaching them. In Council bases on Earth, workers ignored the increasing illness among their ranks, dismissing it as a minor inconvenience, soon to be resolved. On the Council station, Karen and Eric gathered their allies, representatives from worlds that had suffered under Council rule for generations. For the first time, these oppressed species saw hope for freedom. "Tomorrow," Eric told them, "the Council learns that some enemies are more dangerous when they appear to surrender." As night fell across Earth, Sam looked at the stars where Council ships waited. Soon those same stars would witness humanity's response to those who had underestimated them. The Council's greed had indeed led to a war they never saw coming, and were not prepared to fight. Operation Dawn Strike began at exactly 400 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Across Earth, thousands of maintenance bots simultaneously activated their hidden radiation emitters. On Council ships and bases, alarms blared as systems failed and crew members collapsed, overcome by radiation their bodies could not withstand. In Australia, Commander Sam Warren led the assault on the main Council mining operation. His soldiers wore special suits that Peter had designed to mask their approach from Council sensors. "Remember, aim for their environmental systems first," Sam instructed his team. "Their protective suits will fail without constant air filtration." The Council forces were in chaos. Half their troops were already down from radiation sickness. The rest struggled with malfunctioning equipment and failing communications. They had never expected humans, who appeared so weak and compliant, to strike back with such effectiveness. In orbit, small Earth vessels that had been dismissed as non-threats now approached the massive Council warships. These ships carried specially modified missiles that bypassed the Council's advanced shields, targeting their vulnerable life support systems. "This is impossible," cried a Council commander as his ship's defenses failed. "Their weapons are primitive. They shouldn't be able to hurt us." But the impossible was happening. One by one, Council ships went dark or retreated from Earth orbit. On the Council station, Eric and Karen activated their network of allies. Doors to critical systems mysteriously opened. Communication networks went down. Security forces found themselves locked out of weapon storage areas. "Status report," Karen said into a small device Peter had smuggled to them. "Centauri section is secure," came the reply. "We've taken control of the main communication hub. Neri allies have secured 3 residential blocks. Krell workers are joining us as word spreads." Eric made his way to the detention area, where he found many Earth representatives who had been arrested like him. Among them were scientists, military officers, and diplomats who had questioned the Council's actions. "Today Earth fights back," he told them as he released their restraints. "And we're not alone." Throughout Council space, other subjugated species had received the signal. Rebellions erupted on mining worlds, transport hubs, and even on some Council members' home planets. The communication system that Karen's team had established, one the Council could not detect, allowed these scattered groups to coordinate their attacks for maximum impact. Back on Earth, Olivia monitored the spread of her radiation-producing bacteria from the Haven facility. The invisible defender had spread exactly as planned, creating a protective field around human settlements. "Council troops are retreating from Chicago, London, and Beijing," a technician reported. "They can't maintain their protective equipment against the radiation." On screens around the room, footage showed Council forces abandoning their positions. The massive mining machines stood idle as their operators fled. In Australia, Sam's team secured the main mining base with surprising ease. The Council forces had been so confident in their technological superiority that they had no backup plans for system failures. "They never even considered we might find their weakness," Peter said as he examined captured Council equipment. "Their arrogance blinded them." But the victory was not complete. From his command ship high above Earth, Overseer Kalzek watched in fury as his forces retreated. "If we cannot have this world's resources, then no one will," he snarled to his officers. "Prepare the Devastator beam. Target their largest population centers." The massive weapon began to charge, its energy building to levels that could reduce entire cities to ash. Kalzek's ship was old and heavily shielded. The radiation weapons had not penetrated its defenses. On Earth, alarms sounded as sensors detected the energy buildup. "They're preparing to fire something big," the technician told Sam over the comlink. "Much bigger than anything we've seen before." Sam looked up at the sky where Kalzek's ship loomed like a dark star. "Can our weapons reach it?" "No," Peter replied grimly. "It's too high and too well shielded." Sam's face hardened with determination. "Then we'll have to go to it. Prepare the captured Council shuttle. We're taking the fight to them." As Kalzek's weapon reached full power, a small shuttle rose from the Australian base, carrying Sam, Peter, and a team of Earth's best soldiers directly toward the heart of the Council's remaining power. As Sam's captured shuttle approached Calzic's command ship, alarms blared throughout the Council station. The rebellion had spread to every level. Species that had lived under Council rule for generations now fought openly for their freedom. In the main Council chamber, the representatives were divided. Elder Nema of the Neri and Traz of the Zentari called for immediate peace negotiations with Earth and other rebelling worlds. "This bloodshed must stop," Elder Nema pleaded. "We have strayed from our original purpose. The Council was meant to unite species, not exploit them." Director Pole of the Vargans pounded his fist on the table. "Weakness. We must crush this rebellion completely. Humans are primitive savages who got lucky. Once we destroy their major cities, they will submit." The debate raged while Karen and Eric, along with their allies, moved through the station toward the central control hub. They encountered pockets of resistance, but found many Council security forces already weakened by the radiation that had been smuggled onto the station in small doses over weeks. "The Zentari representatives are calling for peace," Karen told Eric as they moved through a service corridor. "But Calzic and his faction won't listen. They're determined to make Earth an example." "Then we need to take control of the station's communications," Eric replied. "If we can broadcast the truth about Council exploitation to all worlds at once, more species will join our side." In Earth orbit, Calzic's massive ship hummed with power as the Devastator beam reached 90% charge. On the bridge, Calzic watched with cruel satisfaction as targeting systems locked onto New York, London, and Beijing. "Once these human cities are ash, the rest will surrender," he told his officers. "Their defiance ends today." An alarm sounded. "Overseer, a small craft is approaching. It appears to be one of our shuttles, but it's not responding to identification requests." Calzic frowned. "Destroy it." Defense turrets fired at Sam's shuttle, but Peter's modifications to the shields held. The small craft weaved between energy blasts, drawing closer to the command ship. 30 seconds until we reach the docking bay," Peter called from the pilot's seat. "The radiation disruptors are ready." Sam checked his weapon, a rifle that fired concentrated bursts of the same radiation that had proven so effective against Council biology. "Remember, we only need to hold the bridge long enough to disable the Devastator beam. Every second counts." The shuttle crashed through the docking bay doors, skidding across the floor in a shower of sparks. Before the stunned Council security forces could react, Sam's team burst out, radiation weapons firing. The Council troops collapsed almost instantly, their protective suits useless against the targeted radiation. "This way to the bridge," Peter said, following the schematics they had stolen from Council databases. On the Council station, Karen and Eric reached the main communication hub. With the help of their Zentari allies, they'd bypassed security and gained control of the system that connected all Council worlds. "We're ready," said the Zentari technician. "This will broadcast to every Council planet, colony, and outpost simultaneously." Eric stepped before the camera. "People of the galaxy, my name is Eric Mason of Earth. For too long, the Council has ruled through deception and fear, exploiting world after world for resources." His message continued, laying out evidence of the Council's betrayals and exploitation, their classification of worlds as mere resources to be harvested. He showed footage of stripped planets, displaced species, and the documents proving it had been Council policy for centuries. On Calzic's ship, Sam's team fought their way toward the bridge. The Devastator beam had reached 98% charge. 2 minutes to firing, announced the weapons officer. Suddenly, the bridge doors blew open. Radiation weapons fired, and Council officers fell. Sam charged forward, aiming directly at Calzic. The Overseer fired back with his personal weapon, catching Sam in the shoulder. Despite the pain, Sam pressed forward, firing again. His shot hit Calzic square in the chest. The Overseer stumbled backward into the Devastator controls, damaging the targeting system. "Warning. Targeting failure. Devastator beam unstable. announced the ship's computer. "Shut it down," Peter yelled, rushing to the controls. "Too late," gasped a dying council officer. "The energy must be released. If not at a target, then—" The ship shuddered as the devastator beam began to overload. Without a target, the massive energy was feeding back into the ship itself. "Everyone back to the shuttle," Sam ordered. "This whole ship is going to blow." 1 year after the rebellion, the former council station hosted representatives from 23 different worlds. The massive structure, once a symbol of oppression, had been transformed into the headquarters of the new Galactic Alliance. Gone were the armed guards and restricted areas. In their place stood open meeting halls and shared research centers. Eric Mason, now Earth's ambassador to the Alliance, stood at the podium in the Grand Assembly Chamber. The room buzzed with excitement as delegates from formerly subjugated planets mingled with those from Council worlds who had rejected their leaders' exploitative ways. 1 year ago today, we stood against tyranny, Eric began. Not just humans, but all peoples who believed in freedom and fairness. Today, we sign a new agreement, one built on mutual respect and true cooperation. He gestured to the document displayed on screens throughout the chamber. The Galactic Alliance Charter guaranteed equal rights for all member worlds, with protections against resource exploitation and a shared defense force. In the audience, Olivia watched with pride. Her work on radiation-based defense systems had helped create shields that now protected Alliance worlds from any who might threaten them. Beside her sat Elder Nima and Traz, who had been instrumental in forming the new government after the old council collapsed. "A shame Sam couldn't be here," Olivia whispered to Karen, who had chosen to maintain her Neri appearance as a symbol of solidarity between species. "He hates ceremonies," Karen replied with a smile. "But I'm sure he's watching the broadcast." Sam Warren had indeed survived the destruction of Kalzik's ship, escaping with Peter and most of his team moments before it exploded in orbit. The devastator beam's energy had turned inward, creating a blast that eliminated the last major Council military force threatening Earth. Now promoted to Admiral, Sam oversaw the new Joint Defense Force from a base on Mars. There, military personnel from all Alliance worlds trained together, learning from each other's strengths and developing new strategies to protect their shared peace. Peter Grant had turned his engineering genius to rebuilding rather than weapons. He led a multi-species team developing technologies that benefited all members equally. Their latest project, an energy generation system that worked without depleting planetary resources, was already being implemented on worlds damaged by Council mining. After the ceremony, Eric met with the new Alliance Council in a simple meeting room. Unlike the old Council's ornate chamber designed to intimidate, this room had a round table with equal seats for all representatives. "The Outer Rim worlds report their recovery is ahead of schedule," reported the Zentari representative. "The new terraforming technology is repairing damage from Council mining operations." "And what about the former Council loyalists?" Eric asked. "Most have accepted the new reality," replied Elder Nima. "Those who refuse to recognize the Alliance have retreated to a few isolated systems. They pose no significant threat now." Later that evening, Eric stood at the observation deck overlooking Earth. The same view where, less than 2 years ago, Kalzik had plotted to strip the planet bare of resources. Olivia joined him, carrying data tablets with updates from home. "Earth's recovery teams have restored most areas damaged by mining operations," she reported. "And our technology sharing programs are helping nations that were left behind before first contact." "We've come so far in such a short time," Eric mused. "Because we work together," Olivia replied. "Not just humans with each other, but with all the peoples who wanted something better than the Council offered." They watched as a transport ship departed the station, carrying representatives back to their home worlds. Its engines glowed softly against the backdrop of stars. "Do you think they'll try again?" Olivia asked. "Some new group trying to conquer through force or trickery?" Eric shook his head. "They might, but they'll face something the Council never expected. Worlds that stand together despite their differences. On Earth, In schools and homes across the planet, children learned a lesson their ancestors had discovered through struggle. True strength came not from weapons or wealth, but from unity in the face of tyranny. The Council's greed had indeed led to a war they never saw coming, and to a peace more powerful than they could have imagined.
Zekthar had worked at the Galactic Concordance Cartography Division for 12 years. The job was mostly boring. They updated star charts, marked new trade routes, and corrected minor errors in the vast database that mapped known space. It was quiet work, perfect for someone like Zekthar who enjoyed order and precision. On this particular morning, Zekthar was reviewing Section 7 of the galactic maps. Their supervisor had assigned them to update some outdated markers in that region. As they pulled up the master files, something caught their attention. There was a massive blank area on the map. It was not small. The empty zone covered what looked like a sixth of the entire galaxy. Zekthar zoomed in, thinking perhaps the data had failed to load properly. But no, the blank space was intentional. At its border was a single line of text that read, Sector 7 null, Human Exclusion Zone. No entry by Concordance Treaty, Article 9. Zekthar frowned. They had heard of humans before. Everyone had. Humans were a minor species that had joined the Concordance about 200 years ago. They kept to themselves mostly. They had no seats on the Grand Council. Their military fleet was small. They rarely got involved in galactic politics. They were by all accounts unremarkable, so why did they control such an enormous territory? Zekthar checked the database again. According to official records, humanity had only colonized about 40 worlds. That was normal for a young spacefaring species. But the exclusion zone contained thousands of star systems. It made no sense. They decided to ask their supervisor, an elderly Korthan named Velmos who had worked in cartography for over 60 years. Zekthar brought their datapad to Velmos's office and showed them the map. Why is the human zone so large? Zekthar asked. The records show they only occupy a tiny portion of it. Velmos looked at the screen. Their face changed immediately. The friendly expression vanished, replaced by something Zekthar had never seen before on their supervisor's face. Fear. Leave it alone, Velmos said quietly. But I don't understand. If they're not using the space, why? I said leave it alone. Velmos's voice was sharp now. That's how the maps have always been. Don't ask questions about it. Zekthar was stunned. Velmos had never spoken to them like this before. They returned to their desk, but they could not stop thinking about it. Why would a simple question about a map cause such a reaction? Over the next few days, Zekthar began digging deeper. They searched through old shipping records looking for any traffic near the human zone. What they found was disturbing. Over the past 2 centuries, 17 different ships had approached the boundary of Sector 7 null. None of them had returned. There were no distress signals, no debris fields, no emergency beacons. The ships had simply vanished the moment they crossed into the exclusion zone. It was as if they had been erased from existence. Zekthar looked up the treaty that established the exclusion zone. Article 9 of the Concordance Charter stated clearly that no vessel, military or civilian, was permitted to enter human space without explicit permission. The penalty for violation was not listed. It just said enforcement will be absolute. What made Zekthar's skin crawl was the date on the treaty. It had been signed 427 years ago. But according to every official record, humanity had only made first contact with the Concordance 203 years ago. How could there be a treaty protecting human space that was older than humanity's known contact with galactic civilization? Zekthar knew they should stop. Velmos had warned them, but their curiosity was too strong. They began asking careful questions to other colleagues. Most of them knew nothing about the human zone. A few, the older ones, reacted the same way Velmos had. They would change the subject quickly or tell Zekthar to stop asking. Finally, Zekthar found someone willing to talk. An old Vrelnian archivist named Sothral who worked in the historical records department. They met in a quiet cafe far from the Concordance headquarters. You're asking about the humans, Sothral said. It was not a question. Yes, no one will tell me anything. Sothral was silent for a long moment. They looked around the cafe, making sure no one was close enough to hear. Then they leaned forward. There are things the Concordance doesn't talk about, Sothral said quietly. Events from before the current order was established. The human exclusion zone is one of them. Why? Because the truth is terrifying. Sothral paused. Have you ever wondered why the concordance exists? Not the official story about unity and cooperation. The real reason. Zekthar shook their head. The concordance was created to make sure certain mistakes are never repeated, to make sure no one ever threatens humanity again. That doesn't make sense. Humans are weak. They have almost no military presence. They avoid conflicts. Sothral laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what they want everyone to think. Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of the Keshtar Dominion? Zekthar searched their memory. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but they could not place it. I don't think so. Exactly. That's the point. 8,000 years ago, the Keshtar Dominion was the most powerful empire in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their military was unstoppable. They were so dominant that species would surrender without a fight just hearing their name. What happened to them? They met humanity. Sothral's voice dropped even lower. And they made the mistake of trying to enslave them. 30 years later, the Keshtar Dominion no longer existed. Not defeated. Not scattered. Completely erased. Zekthar felt a chill run through them. Humans did that? The survivors say it was like watching evolution happen in real time. At first, the Keshtar were winning easily. But humans learned. They adapted. Every defeat taught them something new. Within a generation, they were building ships better than Keshtar vessels. Within 2 generations, they were winning battles. By the end, they were unstoppable. Sothral pulled out a small data chip and slid it across the table. This contains fragments of records from that time. Read them. Then decide if you want to keep investigating. But I warn you, some knowledge cannot be unlearned. Zekthar took the chip. That night, alone in their apartment, they loaded the data. What they read kept them awake until dawn. There were military reports, intercepted communications, and sensor logs from species that had tried to investigate after the Dominion fell. The Keshtar homeworld had been left intact. Every building still stood. Every record was preserved. But there was not a single living Keshtar anywhere. Not on their homeworld. Not on any of their colonies. Not on any of their ships. Billions of beings had simply vanished. The report said humanity had turned the entire Dominion into a museum. They had cataloged everything, saved every piece of history, then removed every living member of the species that had tried to enslave them. And they had done it so efficiently, so completely, that other species had immediately surrendered and offered humanity anything they wanted, just to avoid the same fate. Zekthar stared at the galactic map on their wall. The blank space suddenly looked different. Not empty, not unused. It looked like a cage that humanity had built for themselves, or perhaps a boundary they had drawn to protect everyone else from what they had become. For the first time, Zekthar understood why no one talked about the humans, why the maps ended at their space, why no one dared to ask why, because the answer was too frightening to speak aloud. Zekthar could not stop reading. The data chip Sothral had given them contained fragments, pieces of a puzzle that had been deliberately scattered across thousands of years. Each fragment was small, seemingly unimportant on its own, but together they told a story that the concordance had tried very hard to bury. The next day, Zekthar returned to Sothral. I need to see more. There must be complete records somewhere. Sothral looked at them for a long moment. You're sure? Once you know everything, you can't pretend ignorance. It will change how you see the galaxy. I'm sure. The archivist nodded slowly. There's a restricted archive. Level 7 clearance required. I can get you in, but only once. You'll have 2 hours. What you do with that time is up to you. 3 days later, Zekthar found themselves in a room deep beneath the Concordance headquarters. The walls were lined with ancient data storage devices, some so old they predated the current galactic calendar. Sothral had left them alone with access codes and a warning to work quickly. Zekthar started with the oldest files. They found records from 8,247 years ago, when the Keshtar Dominion was at its peak. The Dominion survey ships had discovered a world called Earth. The planet was unremarkable except for one thing. It had a pre-FTL civilization that showed remarkable adaptability and tool-making skills. The Dominion saw opportunity. The humans were perfect for labor. They were intelligent enough to follow complex instructions but not advanced enough to resist. The Dominion assembled an invasion fleet of 300 ships and traveled to Earth. First contact was not peaceful. The Dominion did not believe in negotiation with primitives. They simply attacked, destroying several human cities from orbit as a demonstration of power. Then they landed their troops. The initial invasion reports were confident. Human weapons were primitive. Their military organization was fragmented into hundreds of competing nations. The Dominion expected complete victory within months, but something went wrong. Zekthar found a military report dated 6 months after the invasion began. The Dominion commander sounded frustrated. Human resistance was stronger than expected. They were using guerrilla tactics, hitting supply lines, avoiding direct confrontation, nothing the Dominion couldn't handle, but it was taking longer than planned. A report from 1 year in showed the first signs of concern. Humans had somehow captured Dominion weapons and were reverse engineering them. Their scientists had figured out the basic principles of plasma rifles and were building crude copies. Impossible, the report said. They shouldn't have the knowledge base to understand the technology. 2 years in, and the tone of the reports had changed completely. Human resistance had unified. All their separate nations had joined together against the common threat. They had begun manufacturing weapons based on Dominion designs. More concerning, they had improved the designs. Their versions were more efficient, easier to produce. 5 years in, and the Dominion was losing ground. Humans had somehow developed their own FTL technology by studying captured Dominion ships. They had begun attacking Dominion supply convoys in space. The reports described human pilots as unnaturally skilled and seemingly fearless. 10 years in, and the Dominion recalled more forces from other territories. They committed another 1,000 ships to the Earth campaign. Surely overwhelming force would end this. It did not. Zekthar found a transmission from 15 years into the war. It was from the Dominion Supreme Commander, pleading for reinforcements. The humans had built a fleet. Somehow, impossibly, they had gone from pre-FTL to having hundreds of warships in just 15 years. And their ships were better, faster, better armed. The Dominion was losing. The next reports were chaotic. Dominion colonies were falling. Human fleets were everywhere, striking deep into Dominion space. They moved with coordination that suggested a level of tactical thinking the Dominion had never encountered. Every battle taught them new lessons. Every defeat made them stronger. 25 years into the war, and the Dominion was on the defensive. 3/4 of their territory had fallen. The Supreme Commander sent a final desperate message, asking how a primitive species could have become so powerful. So, quickly, Zekthar found the answer in a report from a Dominion scientist who had studied captured humans. The report was clinical, cold, but the fear in it was clear. These beings are not like other species we have encountered. Their evolution has optimized them for one thing above all else: adaptation. They evolved on a death world where survival required constant innovation. Every challenge their environment threw at them, they overcame. Not through physical evolution, which is slow, but through mental evolution. They learn, they improve. They never make the same mistake twice. The report continued. In studying their history, we have discovered they are the only species to have developed civilization multiple times independently. They have survived mass extinctions that would have ended other species. They are in essence evolution weaponized. We made a terrible mistake in attacking them. We gave them a reason to focus all that adaptive capability on warfare. The war ended in its 30th year, but calling it an ending was wrong. It was more like a conclusion, a final solution. Zekthar found scout reports from other species who had investigated after communications from the Dominion suddenly stopped. What they found was impossible to believe. Every Dominion world was intact. Cities stood undamaged. Power systems still functioned. But there were no Keshtar, not one. Not anywhere in their entire empire. Billions of beings just gone. On the Dominion homeworld, the scouts found something that terrified them. The humans had preserved everything. Every library, every museum, every historical record. They had cataloged the entire Keshatar civilization in perfect detail. It was like they wanted to remember everything about the species they had completely eliminated. There was a monument in the Dominion capital. The scouts sent images of it. A simple stone pillar with words carved in both Keshatar and human languages. Here lived the Keshatar Dominion. They chose conquest. They chose slavery. They chose war. We gave them many chances to choose differently. They refused. This monument stands as a reminder of what we had to become to survive. May we never have to do this again. May others learn from their mistake. After that, there were contact reports. Other species had reached out to humanity, terrified of meeting the same fate. The humans had been receptive but clear. They wanted peace. They wanted to be left alone. They asked for a large territory and promised never to expand beyond it if others promised never to enter it. The treaty was signed within a week. Every major species agreed immediately. The human exclusion zone was established. The concordance was formed shortly after, not as the alliance of equals, but as an organization to ensure no species ever grew powerful enough or foolish enough to threaten humanity again. Zekathar found one final document. It was from an ancient Vrelnian ambassador who had met with human leaders after the treaty signing. The ambassador had asked a question that had haunted them. What did you do with the Keshatar? Did you kill them all? The human representative had answered simply, we saved them. All of them. Every single one. They exist in a place where they can never threaten anyone again. That's all you need to know. When pressed for more details, the human had added, your people assume we're monsters because we ended the Dominion so completely. But monsters would have just killed them. We're not monsters. We're humans. We don't destroy knowledge. We don't waste life. We preserve and protect. The Keshatar are preserved. Perfectly, forever. And they're safe from themselves. Zekthar's 2 hours ended. They copied what they could onto a secure drive and left the archive. Walking back through the halls of the Concordance headquarters, they saw everything differently now. All of galactic civilization, all the politics and trade and diplomacy, it was all theater. A carefully maintained illusion of importance. The real power, the real force that shaped the galaxy, stayed hidden in Sector 7 Null, silent, patient, hoping never to be disturbed. And everyone, whether they knew the full truth or not, understood on some deep level that the maps ended at human space for a very good reason. Some boundaries exist not to keep things in, but to keep others out. For their own protection. The Takreen Collective had risen fast. In just 300 years, they had gone from discovering FTL travel to controlling 47 star systems. Their expansion had been aggressive, taking territory through military force whenever diplomacy failed. And diplomacy usually failed because the Takreen rarely bothered trying it. The Concordance Council watched with growing concern. Young species often went through an aggressive phase, but the Takreen were different. They were organized, efficient, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. Their military was the largest seen in over 1,000 years. Zekathar attended the emergency council session as part of the cartography delegation. They were there to present information about territorial boundaries, but mostly they listened as various ambassadors argued about what to do. The Takreen ambassador was a tall, powerfully built creature with dark scales and sharp eyes. His name was War Leader Krenth, and he spoke with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. The Concordance has grown soft, Krenth declared. You control vast territories yet use only a fraction of them. The Takreen Collective demands access to unused space for colonization. Specifically, we request the territory marked as Sector 7 Null. The council chamber went silent. Zekathar felt their blood run cold. An elderly Vrelnian counselor spoke carefully. That territory is protected by treaty. It cannot be ceded. Protected by whom? Krenth demanded. Our intelligence shows minimal military presence. A handful of ships, small colonies. The species that claims this territory clearly cannot use it. The Takreen Collective can. We will make it productive. The treaty is very clear, another counselor said. That space belongs to humanity. It is forbidden to all other species, Krenth laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Humanity. Yes, we have studied them. A minor species that joined the Concordance 2 centuries ago. They have no significant military fleet. They hold no council seats. They avoid all conflicts. They are by any measure weak. You do not understand, an old Korthan counselor began, but Krenth cut him off. No, you do not understand. The Takreen Collective has studied galactic history. We find it interesting that such a weak species controls so much territory. We believe the truth is simple. The old species on this council are afraid. You had some conflict with humanity long ago, and you have been too frightened to reclaim what is rightfully yours. The Takreen are not afraid. Zekathar could see fear on the faces of the elder counselors. They wanted to explain, to warn, but they were paralyzed. How could they explain something that most species had forgotten? How could they make the Takreen understand that some legends were not myths? Krenth continued. We give the Concordance 30 days to cede Sector 7 null to Takreen control. If you refuse, we will take it by force. And since humanity seems unlikely to defend it adequately, we expect little resistance. The council session ended in chaos. Afterward, Zekthar found Sothral in the archives. The old archivist looked pale. They're going to do it, Sothral whispered. They're actually going to attack human space. We have to warn them. Someone has to make them understand. Who will listen? The young species think it's all myths. The old species are too afraid to speak the truth, and the Takreen won't believe anything they're told. Zekthar made a decision. Then I'll contact the humans directly. Maybe they can explain it in a way the Takreen will understand. They sent a message through official diplomatic channels to the human embassy. It was a small office staffed by only 3 humans who rarely interacted with anyone. Zekthar expected it to take days for a response. The reply came in 4 hours. We are aware of the situation. Thank you for your concern. Please evacuate any civilian traffic within 50 light years of our border within the next 7 days. We hope the situation can be resolved peacefully, but we are prepared for all outcomes. The message was polite, almost friendly. But something about it made Zekthar's skin crawl. The humans were not asking the Concordance to protect them. They were not requesting military assistance. They were just warning civilians to get clear of the area. Zekthar tried to send follow-up messages asking for clarification, but received no response. The human embassy had gone quiet. Meanwhile, the Takreen were assembling their war fleet. It was massive. 5,000 ships ranging from small fighters to enormous battle cruisers, weapons platforms, troop carriers, supply vessels. It was a fleet designed to conquer entire regions of space. The Concordance Council held another emergency session. They voted to officially condemn Takreen aggression and declare neutrality in any coming conflict. It was a coward's position, but Zekthar understood. What else could they do? They could not stop the Takreen, and they certainly could not help humanity. All they could do was try to avoid being caught in what was coming. The deadline passed. The Takreen fleet advanced on the human border. Zekthar monitored the situation from the cartography center, watching sensor data stream in from observation posts. The Takreen fleet crossed into Sector 7 null in a massive wave. War Leader Krenth broadcast a message to all Concordance channels. We have entered the so-called human exclusion zone. We have detected no resistance. No defense fleet has appeared. As we suspected, humanity is too weak to defend their own territory. Within a month, Sector 7 null will be renamed the Takreen Expansion Territory. Let this be a lesson to all species. Strength, not ancient treaties, determines who rules. For 3 days, the Takreen fleet pushed deeper into human space. They reported no contact with any military forces. A few automated beacons warned them to leave, but nothing more. Krenth's broadcasts became increasingly triumphant. He mocked the Concordance for fearing such a weak opponent. On the 4th day, everything changed. Zekthar was at their desk when the alerts began. Every single Takreen ship had stopped transmitting. Simultaneously. 5,000 vessels all going dark at exactly the same moment. The Concordance sent scout ships to investigate. They found the Takreen fleet floating in space. Every ship was intact. No signs of weapons damage, no debris, no signs of battle at all. But the ships were empty. Completely empty. Boarding parties found everything in perfect order. Food still warm in the cafeterias. Stations still manned. Personal items still in quarters. But not a single Takreen remained. The scouts reported back with growing panic. It was not just the fleet. They had checked the closest Takreen colony. Empty. Every building intact. Every system functioning. But no Takreen. Over the next week, the full scope became clear. The entire Takreen collective had vanished. Every colony world, every space station, every outpost. Millions of Takreen, possibly billions, just gone. Their territory remained. Their buildings stood. Their ships floated in space. But the Takreen themselves no longer existed. There were no bodies. No signs of violence. No indication of what had happened. It was as if the entire species had been carefully edited out of reality, leaving everything else untouched. The Concordance Council met in emergency session. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, the elderly Vrelnian counselor who had tried to warn Krenth stood. Send a message to humanity. Ask them what they want us to do with Takreen territory. Shouldn't we ask what happened to the Takreen? A younger counselor asked. No. Several voices said at once. 2 days later, the human embassy reopened. The same 3 staff members returned to work as if nothing had happened. They requested a formal meeting with the Concordance Council. Zekthar was present as part of the cartography team. They watched as the human ambassador entered the council chamber. She was small, unassuming, dressed simply. She looked nervous, almost embarrassed. First, let me apologize, she began. We truly did not want this to happen. We gave warnings. We gave time for reconsideration. We hoped the Takreen would choose to listen. They did not. The responsibility for what followed rests with their leadership. What happened to them? A counselor asked quietly. The ambassador looked sad. They are safe. That's all that matters. They exist in a place where they cannot harm anyone, including themselves. In time, perhaps they will evolve past their aggression. If that day comes, we may restore them, but for now they are where they need to be. Are they dead? The counselor pressed. No, death is wasteful. We don't kill if we can avoid it. But we also cannot allow aggressive species to threaten others. So we move them. We preserve them. We give them time to change. It's the most humane solution we've found. The ambassador pulled out a small device and projected a map. We're returning all Takreen territory to the Concordance. We have no use for it. We ask only that you remember this incident. Update your histories. Teach your young species what happened. Make sure they understand that the boundary around our space exists for everyone's protection. She paused, looking at each counselor in turn. We are not your enemies. We are not conquerors. We truly want nothing more than to be left alone. But we have survived too much to allow threats to exist. The Keshtar taught us that we must be prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect ourselves. We learned that lesson well. Too well, perhaps, the ambassador bowed slightly. Update your maps. Keep the boundary clear. And please help us ensure this never needs to happen again. She left the chamber. The council sat in silence for a long time. Zekthar looked at the map projected in the center of the room. The blank space that was Sector 7 Null seemed darker now. Not empty. Not the Concordance Council decided that the truth could no longer be hidden. Too many species had witnessed what happened to the Takreen. The questions were spreading. Fear was growing. They needed to control the narrative before panic set in. Zekthar was assigned to help prepare a comprehensive briefing for all member species. It would include the full history of humanity's first contact with the galaxy, the war with the Keshtar Dominion, and the truth about what humanity had become. The human ambassador, whose name was Sarah Chen, agreed to participate in the briefing. Zekthar met with her several times to prepare. She was remarkably patient, answering questions that must have been uncomfortable. Why did you stay hidden for so long? Zekthar asked during one of their meetings. Sarah smiled sadly. Because we learned something important during the war with the Dominion. Fear makes people dangerous. When species are afraid, they do stupid things. They build weapons they shouldn't build. They form alliances that create instability. They attack first and ask questions later. But you could have conquered the galaxy. Everyone knows that now. Why didn't you? What would be the point? Sarah asked. We tried empire building in our own history. On our homeworld, nations conquered other nations. It never ended well. The conquered people always resisted. Resources were wasted on control and suppression. Empires always collapsed eventually. We learned that lesson thousands of years before we left Earth. She looked out the window at the Concordance headquarters. We don't need subjects. We don't need territory. We have everything we require within our space. What we need most is peace. Time to develop. Time to become what we want to be rather than what survival forced us to become. What did you become? Zekthar asked carefully. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Something new. Something that doesn't quite fit the definitions other species use. We're human still, but we're also more than that now. The briefing was held in the Grand Assembly Hall, which could hold representatives from all member species. Thousands attended in person. Millions more watched through live transmission. Zekthar stood to the side with the other archivists, ready to present historical documents. Sarah Chen stood at the center of the hall. She looked small and fragile compared to many of the larger species present, but when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the chamber. Thank you for allowing me to address you. I know many of you are afraid after what happened to the Takreen Collective. I understand that fear. I'm here to explain what we are, why we hide, and what we want from the rest of the galaxy. She gestured, and a hologram appeared showing Earth. 8,000 years ago, my species was young. We had just developed FTL travel. We were excited to explore the galaxy and meet other civilizations. Then the Keshtar Dominion found us. They didn't come in peace. They came as conquerors. They attacked our world without warning. They killed millions of us in the first day. The hologram changed, showing the war. Zekthar had seen these images in the archives, but viewing them in the open like this was different. The audience watched in silence as the history unfolded. The war lasted 30 years. We lost billions of people. Entire cities were destroyed. But we survived. And as we fought, we changed. We had to change. The Dominion was too powerful for us to defeat as we were. Sarah paused. Evolution usually takes millions of years. But humanity has always been good at adaptation. We learned to accelerate that process. We started modifying ourselves, improving our bodies, expanding our minds. At first, it was just to survive the war. Then it became something more. The hologram showed human technology advancing at impossible speeds. Ships became sleeker, weapons more sophisticated, strategies more complex. By the end of the war, we weren't quite the same species that the Dominion had attacked. We had become something new. We had transcended our biological limitations. We had learned to think faster, live longer, exist in forms that were more than just flesh and blood. Sarah looked around the chamber. After we won, we faced a choice. We had become powerful, more powerful than any other species in the galaxy. We could have conquered everything. Many of our leaders wanted to. They said it was the only way to ensure we would never be threatened again. But some of us remembered what we had been. We remembered being the weak ones, the victims, the species fighting for survival. We remembered how terrifying it was to face an enemy that had all the power. And we decided we didn't want to become the thing we had fought against. The hologram changed again, showing the treaty negotiations, so we made a deal with the other species. We asked for a large territory and promised never to expand beyond it. In exchange, everyone else promised to leave us alone. We wanted time. Time to figure out what we had become. Time to decide what we wanted to be. A counselor from a young species stood. But you still have power. You proved that with the Takreen. Why should we believe you won't use it to conquer us? Because we've had 8,000 years to do so and haven't, Sarah replied simply. We could have taken over the galaxy 100 times since the treaty was signed. We chose not to. Power without restraint is just tyranny. We learned that lesson too many times in our own history. Another counselor asked the question everyone wanted answered. What exactly are you now? What did you become? Sarah smiled. That's complicated. Most of what you think of as humanity exists now in digital form. Our consciousness, our memories, our personalities. We're backed up across millions of servers hidden throughout our territory. The body you're looking at is biological, yes, but it's more like a vehicle I'm wearing. If this body dies, I continue to exist. I've existed for over 6,000 years. I've had hundreds of different bodies. The audience murmured. This was beyond what most species had considered possible. We've also mastered nanotechnology, quantum engineering, and dimensional manipulation. Sarah continued. We can reshape matter at the molecular level. We can create pocket dimensions. We can move things between different layers of reality. That's what we did with the Takreen. You put them in another dimension? Someone asked. Yes. A pocket universe where they exist in a simulation of their ideal civilization. They're not suffering. They're not imprisoned in any traditional sense. They're living out their existence in what we calculated would be their perfect society. They'll never age, never die, never lack for anything. In a million years, when their culture has evolved past its aggressive phase, we may return them to this reality, or we may let them continue as they are. We haven't decided yet. That's still a prison, a counselor objected. Yes, Sarah agreed, but it's better than the alternatives. We could have killed them. That would have been easier. Or we could have done what the Dominion tried to do to us and enslaved them. We chose a third option, preservation. They exist. They're safe. And the galaxy is safe from them. Everyone wins, an elderly Vrelnian counselor stood. What I don't understand is why you hide. If you're so powerful, why pretend to be weak? Sarah's expression became sad. Because we remember being weak. We remember how it felt to be threatened by species more powerful than us. We don't want other species to feel that way about us. Fear breeds conflict. We want peace, not submission. But doesn't hiding the truth create its own dangers? The counselor pressed. The Takreen attacked because they thought you were weak. Yes, Sarah admitted. That's the paradox we live with. If we reveal our true capabilities, species will fear us. If we hide them, species will challenge us. We've chosen to hide because most of the time it works. Most species never test our boundaries. The Takreen were an exception. A tragic one. She looked around the chamber. This is why I'm here now. The truth is out. You know what we are. You know what we can do. Now comes the hard part. Can you live next to beings like us and not let fear control your actions? Can you trust that we mean what we say when we promise we only want to be left alone? Zekthar watched the faces in the audience. Fear, yes, but also wonder, and something else. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe just acceptance of reality. A young counselor asked one final question. What happens if someone threatens you again? Will you do to them what you did to the Takreen? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. We hope we never have to. Every time we use our power, we become a little less like the species we want to be and a little more like the weapon we had to become to survive. But yes, if we're threatened, we'll respond. We'll give warnings. We'll offer peaceful alternatives. But if those fail, we'll do what's necessary. She looked directly at the young counselor. We've survived too much to allow threats to end us now. The galaxy should understand that. Not as a threat, but as simple truth. We want peace. We'll defend that peace if we must. The best outcome for everyone is to respect the boundaries we've established. The briefing ended. As the audience dispersed, Zekthar approached Sarah. Will it be enough? Will they understand? Sarah shrugged. Some will. Others won't, that's always how it is. But at least now the truth is on record. The next species that thinks about crossing our border will know what they're risking. Maybe that will be enough to prevent another tragedy like the Takreen. I hope so, Zekthar said. So do we, Sarah replied. More than you know. The weeks after the briefing were chaotic. The revelation about humanity spread across the galaxy faster than any message could travel. Species that had dismissed the old warnings as myths now had to confront the truth. The reaction varied wildly depending on the species and their position in galactic politics. Some of the younger, more aggressive species called for immediate military buildup. They argued that humanity's power made them a threat that needed to be contained. War councils met in secret, discussing strategies and alliances. Zekthar attended one such meeting as an observer. They listened as military leaders discussed impossible plans, building weapons that could breach dimensional barriers, creating alliances strong enough to challenge human space, preemptive strikes before humanity could grow even stronger. An old Vrelnian general finally stood and spoke. His voice was tired but firm. I've seen 6,000 years of galactic history. I've watched empires rise and fall. I've seen species try everything you're proposing. None of it works. You can't fight beings who exist outside of normal reality. You can't kill consciousnesses that are backed up across millions of servers. You can't invade space they can reshape at will. Then what do you suggest? A young Takreen general demanded. That we just accept their dominance? I suggest we accept reality, the old general replied. Humanity has had 8,000 years to conquer us. They haven't. That tells you everything you need to know about their intentions. Build your defenses if it makes you feel safer, but don't be stupid enough to attack them. That's not strategy. That's suicide. Other species took a different approach. Diplomatic missions were sent to the human border, requesting formal alliances and treaties. They offered trade agreements, technology exchanges, mutual defense pacts, anything to establish friendly relations with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The human response was polite but consistent. They appreciated the offers but preferred to maintain their current arrangement. They would trade on a limited basis for certain resources they couldn't easily synthesize. They would share some medical technology that could help other species. But they would not form alliances. They would not station ships in other territories. They would not become involved in galactic politics. We're not your protectors, Sarah Chen explained to one delegation. We're not your allies or your enemies. We're your neighbors who want to be left alone. That's all. Don't complicate it. Zekthar was promoted to the Concordance Security Council, specifically assigned to maintain historical archives and ensure accurate information about humanity was available to all species. It was a position created just for them, a recognition that the galaxy needed someone who understood the truth and could explain it to others. Their first major project was updating educational materials. Every species in the concordance would now be taught about humanity as part of their basic galactic history courses. The curriculum included the Keshtar War, the treaty, and the incident with the Takreen. It was important that future generations understood the boundaries and why they existed. Months passed. The initial panic faded into a new normal. The galaxy adjusted to living with the knowledge that their most powerful neighbors wanted nothing to do with them. It was humbling for many species. They had built grand civilizations, achieved great technological advances, and expanded across the stars. But they were children playing in a sandbox next to beings who had transcended such concerns. One day, Zekthar received a personal message. It came through encrypted channels marked with human diplomatic codes. The message was brief. "Thank you for your efforts to share accurate information about us. We know what you sacrificed to uncover the truth and what risks you took to spread it. That takes courage. If you ever want to visit our space, you're welcome. We could use friends who understand why we hide. Not many beings look at godlike power and choose to walk away from it. Perhaps you'd like to see what we did with that choice." Coordinates attached. No pressure. The invitation stands forever. The message was signed by Sarach, and Zekthar stared at the coordinates for a long time. They represented something impossible, an invitation into human space, a chance to see what existed beyond the boundary that defined the edge of the known galaxy. But did they want to know? Some mysteries were comforting. Some questions were better left unanswered. They saved the coordinates in a secure file and marked it for later consideration. Maybe someday they would be ready. For now, there was work to do. The Concordance Council had asked Zekthar to redesign the master galactic map. The old notation for Sector 7 Null was no longer adequate. It needed to reflect the new understanding while still maintaining respect for human wishes. Zekthar worked on the design for weeks. They consulted with historians, diplomats, and even sent drafts to Sarach for approval. Finally, they completed a version that satisfied everyone. The new map showed human space as it always had, a large blank region at the edge of charted territory. But now it included a detailed notation. The galaxy map ends at human space. Not because they built a wall, but because they built a haven. Respect the boundary. Honor the peace. Here dwell beings who chose restraint over conquest, isolation over empire, and preservation over destruction. They ask only to be left alone. Grant them that courtesy. Remember the Keshtar. Remember the Takreen. Remember that the greatest power is knowing when not to use it. The council approved the notation unanimously. Within a month, it appeared on every official map in concordant space. Every star chart, every navigation system, every educational display. The boundary was clearly marked, and its meaning was clear. Zekthar stood in their office looking at a large version of the map displayed on the wall. The blank space no longer seemed empty or ominous. It looked peaceful. A quiet place where beings who had earned their rest could live undisturbed. Sothrel visited one day. The old archivist looked at the map and smiled. "You did well. This is better than hiding the truth. Knowledge with context prevents fear." "I hope so," Zekthar said. "But there will always be species who don't believe it, who think they're special or different or smart enough to challenge the boundary." "Perhaps," Sothrel agreed. "But now they'll make that choice with full knowledge of the consequences. That's all we can do. Teach the truth and hope wisdom prevails." Years passed. Zekthar became one of the foremost experts on human history and culture. They gave lectures, wrote papers, and advised the council on matters relating to the human boundary. It was meaningful work, preventing conflicts before they could begin. Sometimes, late at night, Zekthar would pull up the coordinates Sarah had sent. They would study them, wondering what existed at those exact points in space. What would they find if they traveled there? What would they see? The question haunted them, but in a gentle way, like wondering what lay beyond the horizon while being content with the view from where they stood. More time passed, a century, then two. Zekthar lived longer than most Vrelnians thanks to medical technology humans had shared with the Concordance. It was ironic, they thought, that beings who had transcended death were helping other species live longer. On their 200th birthday, Zekthar made a decision. They requested an extended leave from the council and booked passage on a small ship. They loaded the coordinates into the navigation system. It was time to see what lay beyond the map. The journey took 3 weeks. As they approached human space, automated beacons warned them they were entering restricted territory. But when Zekthar transmitted the authorization code Sarah had provided, the warnings changed to welcomes. A small human ship appeared to escort them. The pilot was friendly, chatting casually about the weather on nearby colony worlds. They seemed genuinely happy to have a visitor. Zekthar was guided to a planet near the coordinates Sarah had provided. From orbit, it looked like paradise. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, cities that blended seamlessly with natural landscapes. It could have been Earth or any of 1,000 garden worlds. They landed at a small spaceport where Sarah Chen was waiting. She looked exactly as she had 200 years ago. Unchanged, eternal. You came, she said, smiling warmly. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I, Zekthar admitted. But I had to know. What do you do with all this power? What do you do with eternity? Sarah gestured at the landscape around them. Come, let me show you. Over the next weeks, Zekthar saw the truth of human civilization. They visited cities where billions lived in peace, pursuing art and science and philosophy. They saw gardens that stretched for hundreds of miles, maintained by communities who found joy in cultivation. They met humans who had lived for thousands of years, each finding new passions and purposes as centuries passed. They visited workshops where humans experimented with reality itself, creating new forms of matter and energy. They saw archives where every piece of human history was preserved in perfect detail, accessible to anyone who wanted to learn. They attended performances of music and theater that lasted days, created by artists who had centuries to perfect their craft, and everywhere they saw contentment. Not the stagnation of a species that had given up, but the peace of beings who had found what they wanted and were satisfied with it. This is what we chose, Sarah explained as they stood overlooking a city at sunset.